Today, we're jumping right into a huge debate happening in Japan. It's all about money, power, and a question that really gets to the heart of how a democracy should work. So here's the big question. Should corporations and other powerful groups be able to give money to political parties? It's something democracies everywhere are grappling with. And believe me, the arguments on both sides are a lot more complicated than you might first think. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll look at the push for a ban, then dive into the big clashes of ideas: corruption versus free expression, fairness versus diversity, and the very real problem of where the money would come from. And finally, we'll see who won the debate and what it all means. So first things first, what exactly are we talking about here? Well, the proposal on the table was to completely ban a very specific, and let's be honest, a very powerful type of political funding in Japan. Now, it's really important we get this definition right. This isn't just about a company literally writing a check to a political party. It also covers things like buying super expensive tickets to so-called political fundraising parties. Think of it as a less direct, but just as powerful way to funnel money into politics. All right, let's get into our first major clash of ideas. This is where you really see the two sides digging in. Is this money a recipe for corruption? Or is it just a legitimate way for groups to have their say in a free society? They could not be further apart on this. And you can see right here how different their perspectives are. The side that wants the ban says, look, this is just an investment to buy influence. And they point to actual past scandals to back it up. But the other side says, no, this is political participation. These groups are a huge part of our society and economy, and they deserve a voice. This quote just perfectly sums up the biggest fear for the pro-ban side. The worry is that politics stops being about serving everyone, the public, and instead becomes about getting a good return on investment for the people with the deepest pockets. Okay, so beyond the risk of outright corruption, the next big battleground is all about fairness. Does this system actually help or hurt democracy itself? I mean, who really wins and who loses when big companies can cut these massive checks? And this is where it gets really fascinating, because there's a paradox here. Those for the ban say corporate money is totally unfair, it rigs the game. But the opponents flip that right on its head. They argue that a ban would also be unfair because it would crush smaller, up-and-coming parties who need that money to compete. So you have both sides claiming that their way is the only way to have a truly competitive democracy. This brings us to a huge practical question. You know, the rubber meets the road problem. If you get rid of all this corporate money, well, political parties still need to keep the lights on. So what's the alternative? And is it actually any better? You know, there's that old saying that sunlight is the best disinfectant. The twist here is that both sides claim they're the ones bringing the sunlight. The pro-ban side says, let's use public funds and small individual donations. It'll be more transparent. But the opponents fire back with a pretty scary warning. They say a ban won't get rid of the money. It'll just force it underground into untraceable dark money, which could be even more dangerous. So before we get to the verdict, let's just quickly recap what this all boils down to. On one side, it's about stopping corruption and making the system fair. On the other, it's about protecting political participation and, crucially, preventing an even worse problem with dark money. All right, so after all that back and forth, all the powerful points on both sides, who actually won the debate? The judges had to make a tough call. And the verdict was in. In this debate, victory went to the side arguing against a ban on corporate and group donations. So why did they win? Well, it seems to have come down to practicality. The judges felt that the arguments against the ban were just more realistic. They were convinced that a total ban, while it sounds good on paper, could seriously backfire. That key point, that a ban wouldn't stop the money, just hide it, was a knockout blow. And that really leaves us with this final massive question. This one debate is over, but this conversation is happening all over the world. It really forces us to ask ourselves, if we assume that money is always going to find its way into politics, what's the better goal? Should we try to ban it completely, even if that's impossible? Or should we focus on forcing it out into the open, making it as transparent as possible, so at least we can all see who is funding what? That's the real challenge here.